Hey everyone, Clio here, and today I'm going to be giving you my March mid-month check-in. So in terms of my TBR this month, we are not doing well because it is the 15th of March and I finished one book off of my TBR at the moment, but I am currently in the middle of two other ones. So let's just dive into the month and let me explain how I plan to rectify this situation. So first up, the first book that I finished this month is Skin by Reapy. This is not on my TBR, but I did also finish it like the third day of the month or something like it. So it's not like it was cutting into my reading time a whole lot. But so absolutely love this one. I think I ended up giving it like a 4-star, but it probably should be a 5-star because I really think it's does whatever it wants to do perfectly. It is a perfect book in that sense of the word, but it didn't really transcend to a certain level, so it didn't feel like a 5-star in that sense, and that's why I gave it a 4-star, I guess. But I would definitely say highly recommend this one. This came in my Books That Matter subscription box. It was a book for January, and apparently a lot of people have been giving them feedback that they absolutely love this book, and I can understand why. So this is a book definitely about somebody who has anxiety, who has a negative self-image, who has a negative image of her body. And so throughout this book we will be exploring that. And so throughout this we will kind of be going on a journey with her in which she is learning to deal with anxiety a little bit more, in which she is growing coping mechanisms, and in which she is improving on her body image, I guess. I wouldn't necessarily say that she ends up with a perfect body image or anything like that. She just learns not to see herself negatively anymore. She just learns to accept herself for who she is. So I really loved the whole discussion of body positivity, loved the way in which anxiety was represented, and the way in which it showed that, you know, the end goal here, or the way in which this story unfolds, is not like, okay, she meets a guy, or she develops some sort of an exercise routine, or she has some sort of spiritual awakening that kind of transcends her and makes for the fact that there is no more anxiety needed and that she is now normal, or she accepts herself for who she is. It definitely shows that even in her best moments, even in the moments in which she is happy in her life, happy with what she is doing, there are definitely still these moments of flickering doubt, these moments in which her anxiety could surface, her anxiety could spiral, but she just recognizes these sort of early negative voices inside her head a lot quicker and is able to tackle them or to counteract that, to say like, no, I don't mind then, or like if in cases of being like doubtful of whether she can do it or not, she is able to push through it towards the end and to let things be and not stress out about them too much or not overthink them so that her anxiety can spiral. So I really love that showcasing of the fact that, you know, it isn't the case that you heal from anxiety, that at one point your anxiety is just gone. It's just that she learns how to deal with her anxiety a lot more. And this book got me to exercise. It got me motivated to exercise. I bought exercise equipment because of this. I have been exercising. It got me into a great spurt of productivity. I've been spring cleaning like crazy, and I definitely think that this book has a lot to do with it, because in this book our protagonist finds a passion for spinning classes, and she is also, one of the things that she wants to do is kind of make spinning classes more fun for people who don't like to exercise. And that really got me motivated to exercise and to find that same sort of joy in exercise as she was finding there, but not with spinning, because I hate spinning. But so yeah, definitely can recommend this to you guys. Absolutely loved it. Second book that I finished is a book for a secret TBR, so I won't be talking about it, but one day this video will pop up in your subscription feed, so be on the lookout for that. And then the third book that I finished this month is The Name of All Things by Jenn, Lyons. So this is the sequel to The Ruin of Kings, which is the first book in a Chorus of Dragons. So this is an epic fantasy series. I will link my book talk for the first book up above. It's a structurally complex epic fantasy that has to deal with prophecy, has to deal with a lost heir, and so if you like all of those elements, then this could be the book for you. But where I said that confusion was kind of the name of the game with the first one, because I was confused throughout and I was having difficulties being able to follow as the story is presented to you from the perspective of you being an inhabitant of this world, and so not needing all of the exposition that you might get in a traditional fantasy book. The second book really wasn't all that complicated, so I would say if you have pushed through the first one and you kind of want to and you're not sure whether you want to dive into the second one because you found the first one to be overly complex, the second one really isn't that anymore. So you could definitely try out the second one as well at that point in time and see whether that is more to your liking, whether the things you didn't like about the first one are being solved by the second one in that sense. So in the second one, basically just like in the first one, we have a frame story, we have a story within a story. Frame story takes off at the end of the first book. We have our protagonist meet up with two other characters, one of which was definitely referred to within the first book, and they will be telling their story basically of what happened in the timeline of the first one, I'm going to assume. And so because of that, we also kind of start from zero, not fully, but in that sense, like if there were some confusions about what took place in the first book, you can still follow along for the second one. Also, this book starts with a summary of the first one, which is definitely always nice, especially because of the confusing nature of the first book. So really enjoyed this one. What I mainly enjoyed about this, and so the only thing that I'm still going to dive into here, because I'll probably do a separate book talk for this one as well, is the sort of discussion on sex and gender. So we have our story take place within a new culture, and in that culture, sex and gender are very much separate things. When somebody is biologically female or male, they can still gender-wise be whatever they want to be. So it is not the case that somebody who is biologically female necessarily is considering herself a woman, and that is very much an accepted part of this culture. And so a lot of the interesting nature within this book is that it opens itself up to discussions about this, because we have people who are outsiders who are struggling with understanding this culture. So that definitely opens itself up for discussions about the integration of sex and gender and the separation of the two, so which is definitely important for our current times, in which a lot of people are struggling to understand how sex and gender can be separate things, how it doesn't automatically follow that if you are biologically female that you are also going to identify as a woman. So that is one of the main things that I loved about this book, but I'll dive into that also more in the book talk that I'm doing on this book. So that's all that I finished. So I finished 3 books at this point in the month, but only one of them was on my TBR, and that's The Name of All Things. I'm currently in the middle of 3 books, one of which I won't be talking about here because that is also for that secret TBR video. But currently I am reading Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. I am about midway through this book and I'm really enjoying it. I will say that I kind of had difficulties with it at the very beginning, but that probably also has to do with the way in which this story is centered. So this is basically a story about a sort of scientific experiment that tries to raise people's IQ. For this experiment, they have found a sort of volunteer, Charlie, who has a very low IQ. And so this book is told as a sort of diary from the perspective of Charlie, in which he is writing down his experiences throughout this entire experiment. And so as this book progresses, we see his language improve, so his grammar and vocabulary, spelling is very limited at the beginning of the book, and that will all evolve and all become a lot more elevated throughout the book. But what is more interesting is how we see Charlie develop emotionally, and how we have this discussion about how we value intelligence too much sometimes. Charlie at the beginning of this book is often the sort of like punchline of a joke. He's often being mocked by the people around him. People look down upon him. People feel sorry for him. His parents, or mainly his mother, is on a sort of mission to help him become normal. And whereas we also see throughout the book that Charlie, because of his limited intelligence, had this very unique perspective on life, and this uniquely positive perspective on life. Yes, he was being mocked by the people around him, but he also didn't really notice. He just thought that they were laughing with him, and to some extent that is sad, of course, because you as a reader realize that they are just making fun of him. But as he becomes more intelligent and starts to see the way that people have been treating him throughout his life, he also becomes bitter. He also starts to look down upon the people around him on his side. And so it is a very interesting book to talking about this subject. And so I'm very eager to see where this is going to end up in the end. I will definitely say that some of this is very difficult to read. It's very difficult to read about his memories of what his parents, his mother then mainly, made him go through in the past in her quest to have him be a normal boy. And so yeah, that has definitely been very difficult to read through. So definitely would say that be prepared, and I am prepared because apparently a lot of people had to cry with this one, so I don't know whether these hard sequences are the ones that they had to cry with, or whether I'm in for something big going down emotional towards the end of this book. The other book that I'm currently reading is The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in the Mistborn series, first era of Mistborn. This is basically the first book of Brandon Sanderson that I read, and I actually just found out today that I probably read it like the year or the year after it came out, because I have Goodreads data starting in 2008, and so the first time that I read this according to Goodreads is 2012, and that's the only time that I have marked in Goodreads, but that was my rereads. I reread it in 2012, meaning that I read it before 2008, and this book was published in 2006, so I was one of these cool kids who was there at the beginning of this massively popular staple of fantasy at this point in time. But so The Final Empire is the first book in that trilogy, and in it we are following a sort of ragtag crew who are trying to take down the Final Empire, because the Final Empire is ruled by this sort of supreme being, the Lord Ruler, who is kind of keeping the people down. He is oppressing the people and he is exploiting the common people. He is basically enslaving the common people. And so yeah, it's a great one. I would definitely say I absolutely love this one. Love our protagonist of Vin, who is this young insecure girl who has been beaten down all of her life and who has severe trust issues, but who will be kind of growing into herself throughout this book. And she's not just becoming a carbon copy of the people who are surrounding her. She's not just adopting their ideas. She is really developing into her own, and so some of the prejudices that the people around her have, for example, she will be making up her own mind about these things and coming to her own conclusions. Very much love the whole Kelsier-Vin relationship, that sort of like master-teacher relationship. And what is mainly interesting about this book in terms of a fantasy perspective is that in this world you have the possibility to use metals for magic, so you can ingest metals and you will get magical powers as a result. But not everybody has access to this magic system. That's kind of determined by your birth. And so some of them have the possibility to use one of these metals and transform one of them into magic, and then some have abilities for all of them. And of course our protagonist Vin is one of those latter. And so we get the whole exploration of that magical system through her training. So it's not a magical school setting, but we definitely do have a magic training trope within this book, and I absolutely love this one. This one actually could work as a standalone as well. I know a lot of people are daunted going into the Final Empire as their first Brandon Sanderson, because Mistborn Era 1 is a big series. This book is over 700 pages, for example. But I would actually say, don't be daunted. If need be, you can just stick to the Final Empire and not continue on. I think if you make it to the end of the Final Empire, you will want to continue on, but you could read this as a standalone. It has a sort of self-contained plot. Towards the end of it, we will be redirecting the whole end goal of what this book is all about, because we will be given a revelation that will totally change the stakes of this whole plot. But you could still read it and just be happy with that. It is self-contained in that sense. And I definitely think that I personally think this is a better way to start than Warbreaker or Elantris, because I think one of Brandon Sanderson's main strengths is his magic systems, and so definitely for a fantasy reader, that is what intrigues you about reading Brandon Sanderson. There's a whole lot more to his writing that I could praise, but his magic systems are always sort of like hook into his writing, and what a fantasy reader will be like looking for when he's first diving into Brandon Sanderson. And Warbreaker and Elantris both are quite limited when it comes to the magic system, as in we only really explore those magic systems to their full extent towards the end of those books, whereas in Mistborn, the Final Empire, we get magic system from the very beginning and we dive into that magic system early on. So I think this is a better entry because of that reason. So that means that we have the rest of this month left to finish Flowers for Algernon and the Final Empire, which I'm hoping to do this week. And then we have 1 week left to dive into the final 2 books, which is The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde. If possible, I can maybe still fit it in this weekend during Becca's Bookopolython. That's gonna depend on the prompts, I guess. And then The Rogue by Trudi Canavan. Now, I read the first book in this series in a week, actually in 5 days. I read it from Monday to Friday, so that's positive news, because that means that there's still hope for me finishing this one. It is slightly shorter, so that is also there, but of course I was also reading it during Polarton, in which that whole sort of community atmosphere was just making me read so much. But so I'm still hopeful that I'll be able to read these 4 books. You know, I have 2/3 of the Final Empire, half of Flowers for Algernon to go, and these fully. But yeah, I'm still hopeful. I haven't given up on this yet, so wish me luck, and hopefully I'll still be able to finish my March TBR in time, and maybe even finish some extras, because an exciting book just arrived in the mail today and I also want to read it still in March. So yeah, wish me luck and see you guys for a future video. Bye!